Well, now, where are we, gentlemen? Further comments on the situation as now is. Mr. Butler's busy with figures. Mr. Trethuen.
I'm just wishing that he'd taken the bookmaker's offering of 33 to 1 for no party getting a clear majority, because at the moment this is exactly what's going to happen.
No party getting what you might nevertheless call a working majority, or not?
Well, no, I mean, you may get a situation where no party has a clear majority, with the Liberals literally holding the balance.
Yes, because we've yet to have a Liberal seat to start a balance to hold.
No, the one gratifying thing for the Liberals so far is they have pushed up their vote in Exeter, which is the part of the country where they're hoping to pick up the extra seats. Otherwise, they haven't done much yet.
Yeah. Here's the result of Manchester Cheetham, which has been held by Labour by Flying Officer Lieber. This is one of the inner divisions of Manchester.
On a 2% swing, less than there had been in other parts of the North. Though, of course, it was a seat that swung quite exceptionally far to Labour in the last election, right against the national tide. The turnout there was only 60%, the lowest turnout we've had yet this evening.
I see that I called him a flying officer. He's 50. It must have been some little time ago when he was flying. So let's say Mr. Lieber.
He's been an MP since 1945. The
Sure.
MP for this particular constituency since 1915. His brother is also an MP.
Well, now, that Manchester result brings us to date with the results. But I think it being, what, 6 minutes to 11, we may anticipate a mighty flood of them within the next 10 or 20 minutes, for which I trust we shall be ready. Manchester Cheetham.
A preliminary look at the figures does suggest that Liberal intervention is hurting the Conservatives appreciably more than many people have been suggesting. Some figures suggest 2 to 1. Again, we shall get more authoritative figures on this when we've had more results in.
I think the result really is near in Holborn. Let us go over there now again.
Well, as yet, we're still waiting for the official declaration of this poll, but you can see photographers clustered around Mrs. Lena Jager, the Labour candidate, who needed only 656 votes to take this seat from Mr. Geoffrey Johnson Smith. And she's all smiles. We'll have to wait for a few seconds, the official result yet to come, but it looks very much like, judging from her expression, that this is a changed seat and that St Pancras and Holborn has gone to Labour. This is Michael Charlton at Holborn and St Pancras.
It looks what might be described as a rather premature and unofficial announcement, but it may, of course, be right. Bob Mackenzie.
Okay, fine.
He doesn't want to say anything, or does he? He doesn't? No. Well, I saw a little signal which said Bob, which made me say Bob Mackenzie. Right, where are we, gentlemen? Now, it's possible, then, that Holborn and St Pancras South has gone to Mrs. Jager for Labour, but we can't be sure. Ian?
Well, if it has, it wouldn't be entirely surprising. It only needs a swing of 1.5% to Labour. In other words, this is a seat that Conservatives can afford to lose and still stay in power. I think one of the things the Conservatives are going to watch very closely tonight is not so much...
I'm interrupting you to go to Holborn, please.
Okay.
Well, still no official announcement yet. The returning officer pleading for people to get out of the way and let them get on with the count, which I suspect really is academic. That's Mr. Kenneth Robinson, Shadow Minister for Health in a Labour government if one is returned, congratulating Mrs. Jager, who, well, if she loses from here, it'll be the turn-up of the year. This seat, as you've heard, needed only a 1% swing to win it for Mrs. Jager. 69% of the electorate went to the polling booth today, down 1%. On last year, 43,000 on the electoral roll. Mrs. Jager held this seat until 1959 when she lost it to Mr. Geoffrey Johnson Smith, who is wearing one of those tight smiles somewhere else not very far away from Mrs. Jager now. The mayor here has been all over Twitter for about the last 20 minutes. Here it is, will be taking Mrs. Jager up onto the platform with the 2 other candidates in just a moment.
Right, we'll leave them for the moment just to tell you the fact that the Speaker is back in Westminster, a man normally by custom not opposed, but who fought this time.
The Speaker, of course, was originally a Conservative MP, but when he was elected Speaker at the beginning of the last Parliament, he became an independent. A year or 2 back, there were thoughts that if Labour had the majority in this new Parliament, they might want a Speaker of their own. They've never had one, they've always rather liked one, but the suspicion is now that they'll re-elect Sir Harry.
There's a result coming from Liverpool, I'm told. Let's go. Exchange.
Well, here in the St George's Hall, Liverpool, we're waiting for the Exchange Division result to be announced any moment now. Mr Bryzell, the returning officer, is there.
For the Liverpool Exchange constituency is, for Mrs Margaret Elizabeth Braddock,
Labour,
16,985. For Mr Vincent Burke,
Conservative,
7,239. I therefore declare Mrs Margaret Elizabeth Braddock duly elected Member of Parliament for the Liverpool Exchange constituency.
Mrs Braddock home with an increased majority.
So Mrs Braddock holds Liverpool Exchange, which may not surprise anyone. David?
I think when the figures are in, that will be the biggest swing yet. It's the first seat we've had from Merseyside, where people did rather expect a bigger swing to Labour in the Liverpool area than they've been getting in the Manchester area. This may in fact be confirmed now by a 9.2% swing. Yes, much the biggest swing we've had yet this evening in this very safe seat, where you can't draw major conclusions perhaps about what's happening in the marginals.
The bookmakers are drawing conclusions. I hear the odds now are 3-1 on Labour, 2-1 against Conservative. We have a check result on London, City of London, Sir Harry Hilton Foster, the Speaker, the figures from that constituency.
The lowest turnout yet, only 59.7% of people voting in the cities of London, Westminster, in this partially non-political contest. The Liberal lost his deposit with only 11% of the vote. I think that's the first lost deposit we've recorded this evening.
Let's now take for a moment state of the parties.
This is now 9, which is a good achievement in the first 25 results. As I say, in the first 100, it should be at least 12, and already they're doing extremely well on that board. If we look at seats changing hands, 3 so far. Remember that upper right-hand corner, the Tories, if they lose 40-50, they're certainly out. They've lost 3 so far, all of them in the area of less than 3.5%. Well, one was exactly 3.5% swing they lost. The other 2 were less than 3.5% swing. But it's an exceedingly close race, very exciting indeed.
Labour has got Bermondsey in London again. Mr Robert Mellish has been
2.5% swing in this very safe seat, where the Conservative only gets 20% of the total poll. It is a seat that no one could have expected.
Of London's Dockland, of course.
Yes,
Ian?
Bob Mellish is known as the Dockers MP. He's very hard-hitting and effective debater in the House, and is sure to be in a Labour government. I would have thought that there is going to be one, which is very much in the balance.
Now, we have a total votes, I think we might look at. Robert Mackenzie, once again.
Well, now, here's how the votes have been shared out so far. Labour is getting, you'll notice, 45% of the 4. Last time, the Conservatives got just over 49% of the vote. They are doing less well, but one has to keep in mind, of course, these are the heavy urban areas that are tending to be reporting first of all. But again, this reflects an exceedingly close and exciting race. The Liberals are doing well with 11.4%, similarly the ones that are likely to be their strongest areas. Their best areas report tomorrow rather than the first 2/3 of the results that come in today.
Here are the full figures for your records of Liverpool Exchange, which Mrs Bessie Braddock held for Labour. Labour majority 9,746.
8.8% swing, 4% of the population voted, the electorate voted in the Exchange division of Liverpool. Again, much the lowest turnout, lower than any turnout indeed in the 1959 election.
Thinking about the Beatles, I expect.
Bessie Braddock's held this one obviously since 1945.
The average swing now on 22 results is 3.8, more than enough to put Labour in.
The Holborn Declaration coming up. Let's go.
Any moment now, we should have this declaration of the poll at Holborn and St Pancras, which will be an announcement that Mrs Jager has won the seat for Labour. She needed only a swing of 1% against the government to take this seat here. And where is she? We've got hundreds of photographers, we've got the returning officer. The actual percentage swing will be interesting here, because it's one of these composite electorates with a migrant population from some of the Commonwealth countries, from Pakistan and from Cyprus, and one of those overlap electorates with a conservative Holborn, you might put it, and a strongly socialist.
Quiet, please, the declaration of the result by the returning officer.
Parliamentary election, Holborn and St Pancras South constituency. I, the undersigned, being the returning officer for the constituency above mentioned, hereby give notice that the total number of votes given for each candidate at the election was as follows: Ali Mohammed Abbas,
Independent.
226. Lena May Jaeger,
Labour.
15,873. Geoffrey Johnson Smith,
Conservative.
13,117. Quiet, please. And that under the mentioned 13,117. And that the undermentioned person has been duly elected to serve as member of the said constituency, Lena May Jaeger, signed 15th of October.
Well, we have one more result coming in urgently, have we not? Yes, London Dudley Smith is in Brentford and Chiswick for the Conservatives.
That's a 3% swing in this seat, which is in fact where the district line, which has been off the rails for a strike most of this week, runs, and this may be part of the explanation of Mr. Smith's narrow win in this very stable seat that has swung less than other parts of London over the last decade or so.
Conservatives have held this since 1951. Labour needed a fairly big swing of 4.5% to win it.
What about the Holborn situation, gentlemen? We've just had.
That was a fairly high swing, over 4%, I think. We shall have the figures in a moment.
Yes. Ian, Holborn?
6% swing in Holborn's and Pancras.
One point is that the electorate has dropped by 5,000. Lena Jaeger held the seat originally. She took it over from her husband, who held it before. He died. She took over the seat, and then she lost it in 59 to Geoffrey Johnson Smith.
Right. Let's go to Holborn, hear what they're saying. Sorry, we won't. We'll take the result from St Helens, which is now in. St Helens has stayed Labour. This is the glass town, of course, in the shape of Mr Leslie Spriggs.
There was a 4.9% swing in St Helens.
Derby South, Mr Philip Noel Baker, a very famous elder Labour statesman, is back for Labour in Derby South.
3.7% swing there, and this is the first seat we've had from the East Midlands, and it's important to watch the areas we haven't heard from coming in, and this counters the suggestion perhaps that the Midlands are being stickier than others.
Let's see how the seats are changing hands with Bob Mackenzie.
Well, here are the three seats that so far have changed hands: Keighley, Battersea South, Holborn and St Pancras. These are all so far just within the margin of the seats that the Conservatives could lose and still hold a bare majority. But if the swing we've been getting of 3.8%, the latest average we were given, is standing up, then it will mean that the Labour Party will soon begin to cut into the lean meat of the Tory majority, the seats they cannot afford to lose. So far, the three that have changed hands.
Here's London Chelsea. Conservatives have held the seat with Captain Litchfield. Here are the figures.
A 5.6% swing in this extremely safe Conservative seat. Very low turnout, as usual, in Chelsea.
The Tories have held Hastings, so I suppose I ought to say Winkle Up. Somebody will know what that means. Sir Neil Cooper Key has Hastings for the Conservatives. Comments on Hastings, anybody? If not, we'll take the next result in, which is from Rotherham, which has been held by Labour. Brian O'Malley has the seat.
With a swing of 3.7 in this very safe mining Yorkshire seat, 71% turnout there.
Now, here are the full figures for Brentford and Chiswick, which Mr Dudley Smith has held for Tories.
3.6% swing, though, enough to put Labour in. This is the second marginal seat after Billericay that Labour should have hoped to get and hasn't got. They've won 3 seats. They've failed to get 2, which were just outside the ones they had to get.
In Lincoln, Dick Taverne, a very well-known Labour Member of Parliament, is back safely.
If Labour is going to form a government tomorrow, Dick Taverne will certainly be in it. He won the seat at the by-election 2 years ago.
But the swing is only 0.6%. It's the lowest swing yet compared to 59, and it represents a very big swing back to the Conservatives compared to the result in the by-election in March 1962.
I think the very interesting result of Barnstaple very soon to be declared. We go down to North Devonshire.
And as you come to us in Barnstaple, it looks like we're going to get the result at any moment. The microphone has just been taken in for Mr Broad, the returning officer. The result, we're happy to say, ahead of schedule, at least something like 30 or 35 minutes ahead of schedule, as a result of some very good organisation here. This, of course, is a Liberal marginal seat, won in 1959 by Jeremy Thorpe, with a majority of only 362, so anything at all can happen. The candidates are up there at the moment looking at it. It's impossible to tell by looking at the candidates what's going on. They've all got, I would say, long faces. Perhaps it's a professional pose, but you certainly can't tell by looking at them what's happening. Mr. Broad has been determined to make this a model count, and indeed it has been. This is a tremendous constituency which spreads over a very big area, and the last ballot box wasn't in until about 10:15.
Let's just clear a few more results which are in Wickham, which has been held by the Tories. Mr. John Hall has held Wickham.
With a 1.9% swing to the Conservatives, to Labour. Lower than average swing, 81% turnout.
News that Ray Gunter is back for Labour.
If there's to be a Labour government, Ray Gunter will almost certainly be the Minister of Labour in it. Only 2 days ago he denounced the London tube strikers.
Hardly any swing there.
What's the constituency? I've forgotten. Somebody
Southwark.
tell me.
Southwark,
Southwark, of course, London.
Southwark,
Thank you.
yes.
Here's Kingston with a 5.9% swing to Labour, and a Liberal fighting this time, who didn't fight before, getting 17% of the vote.
John Boyd
77% poll.
John Boyd Carpenter, of course, Chief Secretary of the Treasury, number 2 to the Chancellor in the Cabinet.
Liverpool, Scotland has been held for Labour by Mr. Aldrich.
Well, minus 8.5, an 8.5 swing to Labour in Scotland compared to 59.
We take you straight to Bonston.
Ladies and gentlemen, the figures are as follows. Alexander Francis Peyton,
Labour,
4306. Michael Henry Basil Pito,
Conservative,
13895. John Jeremy Thorpe, 19031. And I declare John Jeremy Thorpe elected.
So that means that Jeremy Thorpe, the Liberal, is back in again with a vastly increased majority. So there's no change here in North Devon. This is John Johnston of Barnstaple.
Everybody will no doubt want to comment on that.
3,200 majority for Jeremy Thorpe. This will certainly give the Liberals some hope of 3 other seats in the southwest. Torrington, where Mark Bonham-Carter's trying to get back to Parliament, North Cornwall and Bodmin. The other seats which really are within Liberals' striking distance. On this swing to the Liberals in North Devon, they could win all of these other 3 seats.
Yes, in 1959, when Jeremy Thorpe captured this seat, he had a majority of only 362. He's pushed it up very, very dramatically.
The Birmingham Ladywood result is in, held by Labour. Mr. Yates back there.
The first result to show a swing to the Conservatives. The poll was only 53%, the lowest yet, but there was a 0.5% swing to the Conservatives in this very depopulated part of Birmingham.
The full details of London Southwark, Ray Gunter's seat, which we gave you a little earlier.
5.5% swing to Labour. I'm sorry I got the figures wrong when I spoke earlier, and only 56% of people voting in Southwark.
Here is the Farnworth result, which Labour has held. Mr. Ernest Thornton.
3.5% swing in Farnworth, just about the average we've been having.
London, full details of Holborn and St Pancras South. That's Mrs. Jaeger, we heard from just now.
5.8% swing there. Like South Battersea, more than enough swing in this key marginal seat to win it handsomely for Labour. If reflected in the other London marginals, would be the sort of thing that would put Labour in power. 67% voting.
Both parties put a lot of effort into this one. The Prime Minister went there, Harold Wilson, Lord Attlee. Both parties tried very hard to keep this one.
And a socking good kiss after the result, too. What's next?
In North Devon, Jeremy Thorpe's share of the vote seems to have jumped by over 8%, which is a very impressive increase.
One thing we might have taken more notice, I think David did at the time, was that the Liberals did rather well in Guildford. I see Joe Grimmons commented on this, and this is Orpington, I suppose slightly Orpington-type territory. It might be a good omen for them in Orpington, which they're trying to help.
The Thurrock result is in. Captain Hugh Delage has kept Thurrock for Labour.
3.4% swing to Labour in Thurrock, 74% poll. There has been a story, by the way, that there's a recount going on in Southampton Test. Now, for Labour to win Southampton Test would mean a 6.2% swing. As we saw in Billericay, you can have a recount when there's 1,000 difference between the parties. So it doesn't mean that the swing's as big as that, but it does mean that the swing in that part of England, which we haven't heard from, sounds as though it's above the amount needed to put Labour in.
Things have been happening on the party board, so let's have another look at it.
The position is looking good for Labour. Lead now over the Conservatives of 15, which they should certainly hold comfortably up to the 100 mark, which will be a good omen for a Labour victory. And as you see on the State of Parties board, the 3 seats have changed hands: Keighley, Battersea South, Holborn and St Pancras, and this again is eating away at the Conservative lead. But they've got to get that figure in the upper right-hand corner up to 40 to 45 before they've knocked the Tories out. And that has to be done on the evening.
We're going straight to Stockport, where they're about to announce the result.
And here in Stockport, there's great excitement because Stockport's one of the few towns where both seats are in the key category. They've been described as Conservative vulnerables. The Conservatives held them last time in straight fights with Labour, with greatly reduced majorities, but this time Liberal candidates have made the contest three-cornered. And now the Mayor, Alderman Walter Durr, and who is the returning officer, and the 6 candidates are mounting the platform, and the results should come through very shortly. Labour hasn't won Stockport since 1928, and even in the 1945 Labour landslide, Stockport stayed Conservative.
Ladies and gentlemen, Stockport South constituency. The date of election, the 15th of October, 1964. I, the undersigned, being the acting returning officer for the constituency above mentioned, hereby give notice that the total number of votes given for each candidate at the election was as follows. Donald Ferguson Kerr,
Liberal,
7,107. Morris Orbach,
Labour,
16,755. Harold MacDonald Stewart,
Conservative.
13,000.
So this is a Labour gain in Stockport South, and the majority 3,037.
Very quick comment on Stockport.
7% swing in Stockport, and this is a seat which goes Labour, went Labour in 1906 and didn't go Labour in 1945.
And here's 2 more Labour gains, one from Yorkshire.
That's Bradford.
That's Bradford. Bradford North. That's Sir William Taylor, who won Bradford back in Bradford North and back in 1950.
And another Labour gain.
Lost it. The Labour gain.
The other Labour gain is Watford.
Where where Mr. Fairy Jones, there he is, who was the Conservative MP, he's now lost this again to Labour. By that
And
majority.
both of them
Mr.
with
Fairy
sort
Jones.
of 4% swings.
Right. Gentlemen, comments now on these new Labour gains before we go on. We have one more result.
These are all rather impressive ones. 6.5% swing in Stockport South, and between 4 and 5% swing in Bradford North and in Watford. We've now had 2 marginals that haven't gone, of the ones that Labour needed to win. Everything else has gone, and some things outside the marginal range.
We have the result from Derby North, which has been held by Labour, by Mr. Neil McDermott.
A 6.4% swing in Derby North. The Liberal candidate, I think, just saves his deposit by the merest eyelash, 74% turnout.
If there's to be a Labour government, Mr. McDermott will be one of the law officers, almost certainly.
Here's confirmation of our announcement of the result at Warwick and Leamington, where Sir John Hobson, the Attorney General, is safely back for the Conservatives.
Only
Attorney General.
Only 2.8% swing there, a little below the average we've been running at, which is about 3.7, I think, at the moment. 80% turnout.
Sir Anthony Eden's old seat, this one.
The result of Leeds South East, Alice Bacon. Mrs. Bacon has held the seat for Labour. Any comments on this?
3.5% swing.
Miss Bacon, one of the Labour...
They're announcing the result of Barons Court. Let's go there straight away.
Parliamentary election, Barons Court constituency, 15th of October 1964. I, the undersigned, being the returning officer for the constituency above mentioned, hereby give notice that the total number of votes given for each candidate at the election was as follows. Carr, William Compton, 14,800. Not
Liberal.
Simon Harold John Arthur, 2,821. Richard
Labour.
Ivor Seward, 15,900. And that the undermentioned person...
So Labour have won the marginal London seat by a clear majority of 1,100. As in other places...
4% swing there in Barons Court. and the prediction now from the computer and the statisticians is a Labour majority of 31. But I don't think it'll stay stable at that very long. It may go up, it may go down, but it won't stay just there.
Let's take the result. Lancaster, which has remained Tory.
That's Humphrey Berkeley, who's held this really safe Conservative seat. And Mr. Berkeley's made quite a mark for himself in the House since he's been there. He won in 59.
About a 2% swing, I would guess, in Lancaster.
Here's confirmation of the result for Watford, which was lost.
A 4.9% swing to Mr. Raphael Tuck of Labour. The Liberal just saved his deposit, 12.9. He just saved his deposit back in 59 too.
Labour has kept Luton.
This is very bad news for the Conservatives because it's the seat they won reasonably comfortably at the last general election. They then lost it in the famous by-election after Dr. Charles Hill became Lord Hill.
Here's the result.
One that they would hope to win back. There's Mr. William Howe, who won the seat for Labour.
A 6% swing to Labour compared to 59, a swing back of about 3% compared to the by-election.
In Manchester, Openshaw, the seat's been held for Labour by Charles Morris.
2% swing there in that safe Labour seat, won by Mr. Morris in a by-election last autumn.
Confirmation of the result in Lancaster, which has remained Tory with Humphrey Berkeley. Here are the figures. No comment on these figures? None. All right. We now have confirmation of Bradford North. I hear, incidentally, Mr. Reginald Bevins, former Postmaster General, has just been defeated. However, we'll have confirmation of that in a minute. Bradford North, confirmation of the figures.
4.8% swing in this Labour gain in Yorkshire on an 80% turnout. There's a good deal of evidence now that the north of England is swinging appreciably faster than the Midlands and probably than the south of England.
There is a Labour gain at Liverpool Toxteth. That is the loss by Mr. Bevins of his seat.
And that represents a swing of at least 6%.
Well, this is the first member of the government to lose his seat. And as David said, it required a very big swing to get him out, much bigger than the 3.5%. Mr. Bevins has been Postmaster General for the last 5 years, ever since the last general election. He's one of only, I think, 3 members of the government who's held his job all that time. I don't know how many postmen there are in Liverpool Toxteth, but it's needed a big swing to get Mr. Bevins out of this seat. He's been Conservative ever since 1950. Mr. Bevins came in with this famous class of 1950, which brought in MacLeod, Maudling, Heath, practically every member of the government you could think of.
Here's swing news from David.
The average swing now on about 40 results is 4.1% swing to Labour, enough to give them a majority, but still not enough for one to go absolutely clear on saying what the result of the election is yet.
Now, in the light of the news we've had so far, Robin Day is ready to talk to Len Williams at Transport House. Over to you, Robin.
Len Williams, can you hear me?
I can, clearly.
Good. What do you think of the way things are going at the moment?
Very satisfactory.
A Labour majority of 31 was the last forecast.
Yes, I think I can say without a computer that we're going to have a Labour government. What its majority will be, I'm not still certain.
What result has particularly pleased you?
Well, I think Holborn and St Pancras South, Bradford North, and now Toxteth.
How about Billericay?
Rather disappointing, but still, the Tory got fewer votes, something like 9,000 fewer votes than the Liberal and the Labour candidates.
Could the tube strike have affected that commuter seat, do you think?
No, I don't think so, really.
All right, well, thank you very much, Len Williams. I think you said enough.
You.
Don't think you need to say any more.
No.
Here is the likely figure then that is expected at the moment, a likely Labour majority of 31, but this, as everybody keeps saying, could be up, could be down. Here's the result from East Ham South.
A 4.5% swing to Labour, 68% poll in this East London seat.
Liverpool Toxteth, the seat we've just been talking about.
The biggest swing yet in this election, 9.9% swing to Labour against the Postmaster General, 67% turnout in Liverpool.
London, Shoreditch and Finchley. This has been held by Labour.
Finsbury.
I said Finsbury, sorry, Shoreditch and Finsbury, yes, held by Labour.
This is Ronald Brown, George Brown's brother. So Mr. Brown will now have somebody in the House.
I have news of a Labour gain. Labour have gained Stockport North.
Well, this was more or less expectable, I think, after we heard the news of Stockport South. The two seats are very similar in their party composition, in their voting strengths, and this must represent a swing of something in the order of at least 4% to Labour in Stockport, the other Stockport?
This is a blow for the Conservatives in the sense that Sir Norman Halbert, who was the MP for Stockport North, has been a member for Stockport ever since 1935, for 29 years.
Here is the Surbiton result on the outskirts of London, where Nigel Fisher is back again for the Conservatives.
Nigel Fisher, one of the Under-Secretaries at the Ministry of Commonwealth Relations and Colonies.
But a 7% swing to Labour in this suburban seat.
Here is the result from Gillingham in Kent, where the Tories have held the seat with Frederick Burton.
2.1% swing in Gillingham. This may mean they have a chance of holding on to Rochester, a marginal absolutely next door.
Here's the Wembley North seat, which the Tories have also held with Wing Commander Bullis.
But with a 5.5% swing. My impression is that the average swing figure is still creeping upwards.
Liberals did slightly better here too, David. Votes up a few hundred.
The Liberals got 18% of the vote there, up nearly 3% on 1959. Here's Barking, where Tom Dryburgh is back with a 5.4% swing to Labour.
Tom Dryburgh, who of course is a well-known left-wing member of the Labour Party.
Here is the result from Warrington.
Nearly 6% swing to Labour in this seat on the border of Cheshire and Lancashire.
Here's East Ham North, which has just this moment come in, which has been held for Labour by Reg Prentice.
3.8% swing there.
Reg Prentice is likely to be in a Labour government. He is one of the front bench spokesmen on Labour affairs.
William Rogers has won at Stockton for Labour.
Big slump in the Liberal vote compared to the by-election a couple of years ago when Bill Rogers, who was a man who would be likely to get office in Labour government, probably got in.
There's a Labour gain at Stockport South.
We've had that. It's just a confirmation of the outside broadcast.
Sorry, tape upside down. Never mind. Here are the state of the parties now.
There's no question whatever now that Labour is building up the position it needs to form a government. There still is a slight element of doubt, but after a shaky start, there can be no question, I think, that they're making an excellent run now toward toppling the government. We can see the balance if we look at the State of the Parties board. Labour has run up the Tory defeats now to 9, and they need on the night to get that up to 45 to unseat them. But with this 9 victories in this early spin of results, I think now myself that the Labour Party is going to be in with a working majority.
Bradford West is in. That has stayed Tory. Mr. Tiley has held the seat for the Conservative and National Liberal.
Only 2% swing there, much less than in the other Bradford seat, the more marginal one. There is some evidence, I think, that the marginals are swinging a bit more than other seats.
Here is the confirmation of the result from Stockport North, which was, of course, a Labour win.
6% swing to Labour in Stockport North, 81% turnout there.
Up above me, Robin Day is waiting.
Joe Grimmond in Liberal Party headquarters. What do you think of the North Devon result? I think you're entitled to comment on that, first of all.
Exceedingly satisfactory. Up from, what, 600 to 5,000. This gives us great expectations of other seats in Devon and Cornwall.
You care to mention them?
Well, there's North Devon, there's Bodmin, there's Torrington, and this brings Tiverton and Tavistock possibly into sight. But certainly the first 3 I've mentioned.
And about the national situation with the Labour and Conservative parties, what about them?
Well, it looks to me, as it does to commentators, that Labour are now pulling ahead with about a 4% swing to them.
Any particular results you're interested in? Are you sad to see the departure of the Postmaster General, for instance?
Well, yes, I'm sad to see anyone defeated, but that must happen at general elections. I noticed in some of the home counties seats we're doing pretty well. I think we shall have a big vote by the end of the election.
Thank you very much.
Seats are changing hands quite rapidly. Let's go up to Bob Mackenzie.
For all the seats changing hands, of course, have been in the Labour column. These are the 9 wins so far for Labour. And the thing to note is that we've put in this white outline the seats the Tories are losing that they can't afford to lose. The others they've lost on less than 3.5% swing, these on more than 3.5% swing. So the real blows to the Tory party tonight are Stockport South, Watford, Liverpool Toxteth, Stockport North. This is cutting into the lean meat of the Tory majority and will very likely lead to the downfall of the government.
News that Barbara Castle, a well-known redhead of the Labour Party, has held the Blackburn seat for Labour.
With a 4.7% swing to Labour in Blackburn North. One thing I could add to what Bob Mackenzie has just said, Labour has not failed to win any seat which was under that 3.5% margin that is yet reported.
Here are the full details of the Stockport South result, which we gave you earlier.
A 7.4% swing to Labour in that Cheshire marginal seat.
Maurice Orbach's a former Labour MP for Willesden. He was beaten at the last election. Now he's come back for Stockport. I think before we finally leave Barbara Castle, we should mention that she is almost certain, she is certain to be in a Labour government if there is to be one, possibly in the cabinet.
We take, yes, this the result of Manchester Gorton, where Connie Ziliakis, very famous Labour man, is back in the seat for Labour.
A 4% swing to Labour in Manchester Gorton.
The full details of Luton, which we gave you earlier, kept by Labour.
And there a 5.9% swing to Labour compared to the last general election, a swing back to the Conservatives of 3% compared to the by-election last November. 79%, 80% poll in Luton. The poll has dropped much less in the marginal seats.
I stop you to announce that Labour has gained Acton in London.
This is not at all surprising. It only needed a swing of 1.2%, well below the sort of swing they're now getting. It was won by the Conservatives. It was held by Labour from 45 to 59, won by the Conservatives the last election with a majority of under 1,000.
Now, I believe, if we join Robin Day, he can talk to a very happy Jeremy Thorpe in Barnstaple.
Jeremy Thorpe, what in your famous Devon dialect do you say about your result?
Well, Robin, it's very nice to see you on the screen, larger than life. I'm naturally delighted. We've got an overall majority with a 5,000 Liberal majority and a lost Labour deposit. And I think this is a tremendously exciting result for the Liberal Party, and I hope it augurs well for results tomorrow.
How far do you think it's a personal victory for you or for the Liberal Party in that part of the world?
Well, I think this is basically Liberal territory. Had it not been so, I would never have been able to make any impact on it.
Care to make a prediction for the neighbouring seats in which the Liberals have high hopes?
Yes, I think we shall win Torrington. I think we shall win Bodmin. I hope we shall win North Cornwall. And I regard Tiverton as a dark horse, which I shall be watching very carefully.
Thank you.
It's the majority figure for Acton, which the Conservatives lost.
That is Philip Holland, the Conservative MP who won this seat in 59 and has now lost it to Bernard Flood, who is the Labour candidate, who is director of a commercial television company. That's Philip Holland, who's a local businessman, fought the seat hard, won it in 59, now has lost it.
A swing of well over 4% in Acton. And we've actually got some figures here on the swing in marginals and overall. Overall, on 59 results, the average swing is now 4.3. The swing in Labour marginals, in the Conservative-held marginals, is 4.6, slightly above the figure that the national average is showing.
They're announcing the result to interrupt you at Bolton. Over we go.
And any second now, the town clerk will declare the result of the count in Bolton West, a seat held by the Liberals since 1951.
Ladies and gentlemen, the result of the poll in Bolton West is as follows. For Oaks, 16,519 votes.
Labour.
For Sisson, 13,522 votes.
Conservative.
For Holt, 10,086 votes.
That's a Labour gain from Liberal. A Labour gain from Liberal in Bolton West. This is Keith Macklin in Bolton.
So Labour has taken Bolton West.
This is a very sad one for the Liberals. This is one of the two towns in the north of England where there was a Conservative-Liberal pact. In other words, the Conservatives stood down in one half of the town, the Liberals stood down in the other. This pact held good up until the last election. It was then broken. Conservative and Liberal stood in both halves of Bolton. This was the Liberal half, which Arthur Holt has held ever since 1951, and it's now gone to Labour. We'll see what happens in the other half.
I interrupt you to tell you that there's a Labour gain at Bury and Radcliffe.
This is remarkable because Bury and Radcliffe was another seat like Stockport that stayed Conservative in 1945. I don't think Bury, in fact, has been Labour before. Labour is winning seats they didn't win in 45. It would be very remarkable, and they would point to an enormous landslide. However, Bury was thought to be, has had its boundaries changed a bit, and was thought to be one of those that Labour might gain, like the Stockports.
And also this time there was a Liberal standing in Bury for the first time since 1950. One interesting thing about Bury is that the seat's now been won for Labour by David Ensor, whom you may often have seen on television.
Here's the full result at Southgate. Here are the figures.
4.8% swing in Southgate. Liberal vote goes up. by about 2.5%. The Liberals generally are going up.
There's David Ensor, who's, we've got a picture now, David Ensor, who's won Bury and Radcliffe for Labour by this big swing that David was reporting.
About 4% swing, I would guess.
Here's the Dewsbury result. Labour are back again in Dewsbury with Mr. David Ginsberg.
3% swing in Dewsbury, 3.1. First for some time we've had that is below the amount required to put Labour in.
Here are the full figures for Barons Court in London, which you saw just now.
The lowest London swing we've been having yet, 2.9% only to Labour, but enough to win this marginal seat just south of where we're sitting at the moment.
Here is the
72%
Barnsley result in the West Riding, where Roy Mason is back again for Labour.
If there is to be a Labour government, as now looks likely, Roy Mason is hotly tipped to be the next Postmaster General.
Only 1% swing in this Yorkshire mining seat.
Ian Mikado is back in Poplar for Labour, or is in Poplar.
There is Ian Mikado. He was beaten, you remember, at Reading in 1959. Now he's come back for this rock-safe Labour seat in East London. He's a very prominent left-winger. He used to manage the Bevanite group in their heyday.
Here's the Eccles result, which is a hold for Labour. Another MP, another Labour MP in Eccles.
With a substantially increased majority.
The new Labour MP, the previous one.
Newcastle on Tyne North is now in. The Tories are again in Newcastle North in the shape of Mr. Elliott.
A 4% swing in the first seat I think we've had yet from the northeast, from the Tyne Tees area.
Let's now join Bob Mackenzie.
I have no doubt whatever now in my mind that Labour is headed for a good win. It's still a close thing. If you look at this forecast table, you remember we said that Labour needed 3.5% swing. It's getting about a 4.3% swing. And this does point to a Labour majority of somewhere in the vicinity of 30. They haven't lost any of the seats, they haven't failed to win any of the seats they really needed to get up to that 30. After the slightly disappointing start for them at Billericay, Labour is running strongly now and should get its working majority. We might just take a look now what's happened to some famous names so far. If you take...
Here's Harold Wilson arriving at Highton. Let's go over and watch it. Well, we just caught that very small glimpse. We have news that Mr. Ernest Marples is back.
Mr. Marples has held his seat in Wallasey, which he's held ever since 1945. There he is, but his majority has dropped considerably.
An 8% swing, I guess.
Majority has dropped from 15,000 to 6,000. Mr. Marples is one of the other, as I said, there are only 3 ministers who held the same job all through the last Parliament. He was one, and he certainly made news.
Here is the confirmation of Bury and Radcliffe, which we gave you earlier, Mr. Ensor being in.
4.8% swing to the Labour Party in Bury and Radcliffe. Liberals just saved their deposit with 14% of the poll. 82% voting there, more than last time.
Here's Manchester Withington, which the Tories have held through Sir Robert Carey. No comment on Manchester Withington?
Right. 4.7% swing in Manchester Withington.
Here's confirmation of London Poplar, which we gave you earlier, in Mikado's seat. Here are the figures, I should say.
Incidentally, just to chip in very quickly, we've had news of a recount at Hornsey.
This is a fantastic thing.
Incredible.
This is the full result now from Acton, for your information, the full figures. That's a Labour gain, of course, as we say. Here is the Liverpool Edge Hill result, which has been held by Labour by Mr. Irvine, QC.
This has been Labour at least since 1945.
An 8% swing there. The swing around the Merseyside is obviously enormous.
Confirmation of Mr. Marple's victory in Wallasey, Cheshire. The full figures. I see that Mr. Herbert Bowden, the Labour Chief Whip, is back.
There's Mr. Bowden, and if there is to be a Labour government, as now looks likely, he's almost certain to be leader of the House. He's a very tough but popular character. He was very close to Hugh Gateskill. He's now at least as close and extremely influential behind the scenes with Harold Wilson. He's one of the strong men.
Swing there.
Can I interrupt you to take the Wimbledon result, which is now in, which the Sir Cyril Black has held for the Conservatives, not surprisingly perhaps.
5.3% swing in Wimbledon.
Let's go back to Highton and see Mr. Harold Wilson again.
Liverpool expects watching this exciting series of results. When he arrived, he didn't offer any statement to the press. He went straight through the school corridor and into the cant. The result of the count originally was expected about 1:30, but it's now been thought it might come much earlier. Outside the hall, there are about 100 journalists from Italy, from France, from America, from practically every part of the world who've been waiting here, all watching the television sets which are dotted all about this schoolroom. Mr. Wilson has had for him a relatively quiet day. He's been very much the local candidate, going around Acton, being cheered by school children, shaking the hands of people in committee rooms, and generally being extraordinarily relaxed. He went to bed for an hour this afternoon, very calmly. The thought at the moment is that the result will be coming very soon. We've all been outside waiting for Mr. Wilson, and he, I think, must have heard it was coming very much earlier than he'd originally been told, and I think he came out very quickly from Liverpool, from his hotel room. There have, so far he knows, been 12 Labour games, and his entourage were tremendously excited as they arrived here and were quite remarkably full of enthusiasm. Mr. Wilson has been taking the day, as I say, extremely calmly. He was relaxed, and well, I'll come back when the result is due.
Here's the figure by which Duncan Sands is in at London Streatham. Here's his majority.
An 8% swing or so. It does seem the swing against ministers is bigger than the swing in the rest of
Mr. Sands, of course, Secretary of State for the Colonies and Commonwealth Relations. If the Conservatives are now going into opposition, it will be interesting to see what happens to him.
Any further comment on Sands? Well, we can take the Southampton-Itchen result, which is in.
A 5.7% swing to Labour in Southampton-Itchen. And we hear there's a recount going on in Southampton Test, which does imply at least a 6% swing there.
Bradford South, which Labour has held with Mr. Craddock.
A 1% swing only in Bradford South, one of the lowest swings we've had for a long while. 78% voting in Bradford South.
Confirmation. Oh, here's news that Grimsby has stayed Labour.
Tony Crossland there has held Grimsby for Labour with a greatly increased majority. He held it in 59 with a majority of only 101. Now he's pushed it up to over 4,000.
Here,
if Labour is in power, Mr. Crossland will undoubtedly get a job.
Here are the full figures for Leicester South West. That's where Mr. Bowden, the Labour Chief Whip, is back. Full figures.
2.4% swing there.
Birmingham Edgbaston is in. Miss Edith Pitt, very well known Member of Parliament, is back for the Conservatives in Edgbaston. The figures are with you. Here we have the confirmation figures of Duncan Sands in Streatham. Here are the full figures of that constituency.
6%, 6.4% the computer says for Streatham on a 72% poll. Liberal just saves his deposit.
Here is the Crewe result, which is now in. Labour's in again at Crewe with Mr. Schofield Allen. Here's news of a Birmingham Labour gain, a very small one.
That's in All Saints, Birmingham. That, I'm sure, is John Hollingsworth, who won the seat in 59 by a majority of only 20. Therefore, it needed only a fractional swing for it to go to the left. And I thought it'd been more than 470.
It's a very small swing, that. It's under 1%, and it may be that the coloured issue made a difference there, but it's a very depopulated area.
Right, but there's a Labour gain at Liverpool Kirkdale. We take you now to Smethwick.
And here is the result at colour-conscious Smethwick, where the Labour Shadow Foreign Secretary Patrick Gordon Walker is defending a Labour majority of 3,500 against a Conservative, a Liberal and a last-minute Independent. Here is the returning officer, Alderman C.V. Williams, who's the Mayor of Smethwick, waiting for silence so that he can make his announcement.
Now, do you mind if I have my say now? Do you mind if I have my say now? I do not propose to read this to Bedlam. If you can't be quiet, you'll wait until you are. Parliamentary election, Smethwick Borough constituency, date of election 15 October 1964. I, the undersigned, being the returning officer for the constituency above mentioned, hereby give notice that the total number of votes given for each candidate at the election was as follows, namely, Davis, Dudley, Trevor,
Independent,
262. Gordon, Walker, Patrick, Christian,
Labour,
14,916. Griffiths, Peter, Harry, Steve,
Conservative,
16,000.
16,690. So it's a Conservative gain.
And Patrick Gordon Walker has lost Smethwick. Gentlemen?
Well, this is the most fateful single result of this election. The one Conservative gain, I suspect in their hearts, may be one they would have preferred not to get, because they must have got it through the white backlash.
7% swing to the Conservatives in Smethwick on the white backlash. The Conservative candidate fought a very lone wolf campaign there, rather shunned by his party, and he did, on presumably a largely racial platform, completely defy the national trend.
Serious problem for Harold Wilson. Patrick Gordon Walker, if there's going to be a Labour government, he would want it as Foreign Secretary. He can make a man a minister without a seat in the House of Commons. You merely create a vacancy very quickly by giving somebody a peerage, which is obviously what will happen now, I think.
Right, we now join Robert Mackenzie on the forecast table.
Here's the forecast table as we sit. So far, Labour swing to Labour is 4.3, well over what's required to unseat the government. And the just changing at the moment is the likely majority of 29, according to the latest word we've had from the computer. Quite clearly, though, with a little wobble, Labour is well over the hump on what we've had so far. They're running well ahead of what was required to win and unseat the government.
Dinglefoot is in at Ipswich.
But no swing there. I think it's the first East Anglian seat we've heard from, and it represents virtually no change from last time, possibly a slight swing for the Conservatives.
Please. I've got no errors. A Labour gain at Liverpool West Derby.
This is one which required a swing of nearly 4% for Labour to win. It's a seat, it was once David Maxwell's 5-seat. Seat had been held by John Woolham now since David Maxwell's 5 took up.
8.7% swing there too.
There is also a Labour gain at Liverpool Walton.
But the Conservatives have won back South Dorset, the one you remember that they lost at the by-election when the Conservative vote was split. There it is. Tories come back on South Dorset. That's Guy Barnett, the Labour man who won the seat at the by-election. He's now lost it, but not by a very big majority, David.
Well, that represents about a 6% swing to the Labour Party compared to 59, although, of course, about a 3% swing to the Conservatives compared to the by-election.
Here are the full figures of Birmingham All Saints, which Labour gained. Full figures.
Only 0.8% swing. The Midlands or the Birmingham area certainly is much better territory for the Conservatives.
Jimmy Edwards has failed to gain a seat in London.
Jimmy Edwards failed to gain a seat. I didn't think he had much chance because this was a Labour seat and the tide is obviously rung against him. I think it should be said that he seems to have fought a very serious and straightforward campaign.
But there was a swing of the order of 6% there against the Conservatives.
In Manchester Moss side, Frank Taylor has held the seat for the Conservatives. Here are the full figures at the same time.
With a drop of 6% swing to Labour in Manchester Moss side compared to 1959, a slight recovery compared to the by-election when they were pushed into third place.
Full figures of Liverpool Kirkdale, which Labour took. Full figures for your record.
That's again
here we have the result,
Merseyside swing.
Result from Bath, which has stayed Tory.
Only a 0.8% swing to Labour in Bath, way below the national average. The Liberal vote jumps from 13% to 18% in Bath.
Full figures of Liverpool Walton, which we gave you earlier, the Labour gain there.
This must represent about an 8% swing in Liverpool Walton.
Here is London St Pancras North, now in.
Kenneth Robinson will almost certainly be the Minister of Health if there is to be a Labour government.
5% swing there.
We now have Darwin, Lancashire, result in Charles Fletcher Cook re-elected for the Conservatives in Darwin.
And the Liberals got 26% of the vote there, a 4.1% swing from Conservative to Labour.
Here is Ruislip Northwood, which the Conservatives go into again with Mr. Peter Crowder.
A 4%, 3.8% swing to the Conservatives, to Labour in this suburban Middlesex seat.
Full figures of the Labour gain in Liverpool West Derby.
That's an 8.7% swing, 73% turnout in West Derby.
London Greenwich is just in, here it is. No change.
That's Dick Marsh, one of the younger, livelier Labour MPs. If there's to be a Labour government, he will certainly get a post.
6.4% swing in London Greenwich.
Full figures of the Tories come back in Dorset South.
6.6% swing to Labour compared to 59, but of course a swing back to the Conservatives compared to the by-election when Labour got in on a split Conservative vote on the common market issue when there was an independent Conservative candidate.
Here are
Mayo got 14,000 votes.
Here are the figures. Here are the figures of Bolton East, which Labour gained.
That's the Labour gain we haven't had.
Yes, this is the other half of the Bolton, which was involved in this Liberal Conservative deal, which was scrapped just before the election. It's bound to go pretty well.
Here's the result of London Bethnal Green. Labour has held Bethnal Green with Mr. Holman.
1.1% swing.
Here is the confirmation figures of Mr. Jimmy Edwards' failure in London Paddington North against Mr. Ben Parkin.
6.5% swing there, about the average for this area of North London.
Figures of the Ipswich result, which you had earlier. That's Dinglefoot.
Manuela Sykes slightly increased the Liberal vote there up to 24%. Only a 0.6% swing to the Conservatives.
Quintin Hogg is in.
He's held his seat. There he is. He's held his seat at Marylebone with his majority has almost been, the majority there has almost been halved. He, of course, went in at the by-election last year.
That's the biggest swing since, compared to 59, we've yet had. 10.7 against Quintin Hogg. Ministers just are doing very badly tonight.
Now let's go for the state of the parties.
Here we are then. Labour lead now at 30 with out of the first 123 results. This is better than par for the course and continues to point very clearly to a Labour government. Then over the next table, the losses, you'll notice, the Conservatives 15 so far. When that figure turns to 45, they're really on the skids. Certainly at 50, they'll be white out on the night. Labour, you see, picked up 16 and lost 2 seats so far, including the shadow foreign minister, for whom one will rather like to predict that he'll be back in the House by some other means before very long. Liberals have lost their 1 seat to Arthur Holt and held, of course, their seat in Devon. That's the picture as of now, and I would say still pointing very distinctly to a Labour win.
Here's news that Sidney Silverman is back in Nelson and Colne for Labour.
2% swing there.
Very famous Labour member, of course. We have details of the Grimsby result. Anthony Crossland's victory there for Labour.
4% swing to Labour, 4.2% swing in that Lincolnshire fishing port.
We have the result in from Southport, where there's no change. Tories home and dry.
4.4% swing. Labour overtakes the Liberals into second place.
Here's the result of North Down North, if you like, in Northern Ireland, with a pretty recommended and expected Ulster Unionist majority. Let's take Merton and Morden in London, which have just come in. No change there.
6.1% swing in Merton, though, to the Labour Party, 82% turnout.
Here is the result from Chorley in Lancaster. Labour's held Chorley, as you can see. There's no change there at all. Here's London Brixton just in for Labour.
A 5% swing to Labour in Brixton.
Now we go to Brighton Pavilion, which, not surprisingly, I think Sir William Teeling has held for the Conservatives. Here is Pudsey, Yorkshire Pudsey.
1.3% swing only in Pudsey, 84% turnout.
Now, I hear that Harold Webb, our northern industrial correspondent, is ready to talk to people in Liverpool, so let's go up there and join him.
Richard, we are being told...
Outside St George's Hall, Liverpool, mainly excited Labour supporters, with 2 results still to come in the 9 constituencies. Labour have made 4 gains, the Postmaster General is out, and the crowd are here shouting, "We want Wilson!" can I just have a word with one or two of you? What's your view about these results?
Well, we want a clean sweep of the country.
Did you expect 4 gains in Liverpool?
Definitely, yes.
What about you? Did you expect Labour to sweep Liverpool like this?
No, I definitely think Tories should be there without any doubt whatsoever.
Why do you think it's happened?
What about the Beatles, brother? Well, I don't know, but I think the Tories should be there without any doubt whatsoever. Because
Are you all now convinced there's going to be a Labour government?
No! Unfortunately, yes.
They get shut out. They get shut out.
Good on Mr. Wilson. What we do want is a new party. To string out the Conservative, the Labour, the Communist and the Liberal, and have a clean party.
We have news that Sir Keith Joseph is back in Leeds, and also that Roy Jenkins is back for Labour in Stechford, Birmingham.
Roy Jenkins sure to be have a senior post in a Labour government.
I have news of a Labour gain in London Clapham.
Well, this was to be expected, I think, after the result, but it's a very narrow majority, much the smallest majority we've yet had.
There
Dr.
is
Glynn, the Conservative member, defeated there. Labour gets in by 56 votes. It's the first 2-figure majority that we've had, and it represents a smaller swing than there have been in some of the other London marginals.
With news of a Labour gain in Newcastle upon Tyne East, we go now to meet Mr. Patrick Gordon Walker, who must be...
The result of the Smethwick election has been a shattering blow to Mr. Patrick Gordon Walker, the Socialist Shadow Secretary. Mr. Gordon Walker, this has been the roughest battle of the whole election. Why do you think you lost when the national trend seems to be that Labour will have a majority of about 30 seats?
I think there can only be one explanation, that a particular campaign was fought in Smethwick. In
What
a different
kind of campaign?
A dirty campaign based on immigration, as the immigration issue working up race feelings.
Do you attribute your defeat entirely then to some sort of smear campaign against you?
Otherwise the swing would have been the same in Smethwick as everywhere else.
Is it possible, sir, that you and the rest of the Labour Party rather underestimated the important emotional effect of the racial problem?
Because there's a racial problem in many other constituencies. It only made a difference here in Smethwick.
But it hasn't been to the same extent in other constituencies.
Yes, there are more immigrants in other constituencies than there are in Smethwick. There are more in All Saints.
Now, you were branded as a man who led the socialist opposition to the Commonwealth Immigration Bill in 1962.
Well, I didn't lead it. Hugh Gaitskell led it, but I followed it.
You were the spokesman for it.
I was the second spokesman for it.
Have you had occasion to change your views on it at all?
No. I then thought there ought to be controls over immigration. I was fighting a particular way of controlling immigration. That was what the argument was about. I then said and thought and still think that it is right to control immigration.
Now, since it's quite clear that in Smethwick at least, racial intolerance is a political factor, do you think that this might spill over into other constituencies in future elections?
I don't think so. I don't think other Conservatives will take it up in this way.
What are your plans now, Mr. Patrick Walker?
Well, I'm no longer a Member of Parliament. I'll have to consider what I'm going to do.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
So, here's the state of the parties at the moment. Labour lead over Conservative 26. And we have news that in Newcastle, well, this is a repeat of what we said just now, Newcastle upon Tyne East, the Tories are out and Labour has gained the seat.
That's Mr. Fergus Montgomery, who won the seat for the Conservatives in 1959. He's a local man.
News that Labour has kept Edmonton in London.
Austin Albion is one of their experts on automation. He'll probably be in the government.
Aberdare is in. Labour's back in Aberdare, which has been a Labour seat for a long, long time. Mr. Probert has it. We have confirmation of the Birmingham-Stechford result, which here are the figures.
Roy Jenkins, of course, will get a senior post in the Wilson government.
The biggest swing in Birmingham, but not very big.
Leeds West is in. That's Charles Pannell, has held the seat for Labour. There's been no change.
3% swing there.
And Charles Curran, I see, has won his seat.
This is a good one for the Conservatives because it only needed a 1.5% swing for Labour to win it.
I may be repeating, but we have a Conservative gain in Birmingham Perry Bar and a Labour gain in Manchester Wythenshawe. Conservative gain and a Labour gain.
The Perry Bar thing was only 190 majority or so last time, but it does indicate there's a swing against Labour or not doing well in Birmingham.
There's the Perry Bar result. That's Mr. Charles Howell, the Labour MP who has now lost the seat. And now the Manchester result, there's Mrs. Evelyn Hill, who runs a series of tripe shops She has held that seat ever since 1950. She's now lost it by a substantial majority.
A 5% swing there, and I believe there's another Labour gain in Manchester coming up.
Here's the Bebbington result. The Tories have held Bebbington.
A new member getting in with a much reduced majority, exceeding Lord Oakeshott, who's been the Prime Minister's personal aide in the last election, who was the member for Bebbington.
Full details of the London-Edmonton result, which the Labour Party kept in Mr. Albu.
4.8% swing in Edmonton.
We have the Harrow East result in from London. Here are the figures.
A slight swing to Labour there.
We now have Manchester Blackley, which has arrived here as a Labour gain.
Derek Johnson's held this seat for a long time. He used to train racehorses. He lost this one by a short head.
Here is confirmation of Birmingham Perry Bar and the full figures.
1% swing or so to the Conservatives in Perry Bar. This joins Smethwick as the second Conservative gain, and only about the fourth case where there's been a swing to the Conservatives.
Manchester Ardwick has been held for Labour by Mr. Leslie Lever.
3.1% swing.
The other Lever brother.
We have Crosby, which is in, and a Labour gain just announced, Birmingham Sparkbrook.
Well, this was expected. There were 3 Labour marginals they hoped to win in. We're still waiting for Yardley, but they've won All Saints. They've now won Sparkbrook, but they've lost one, Perry Bar, partly perhaps new housing development, partly possibly the coloured issue, possibly other personal factors there.
One factor could well have been the motor industry.
And we now have a view of the possible majority for Labour at the moment, which is the figure you can now see in front of me.
29.
We have Birmingham Labour gain just in.
And that is Mr. Leslie Seymour, who has just lost Birmingham Sparkbrook. He was the Conservative MP, won it in 59. As I say, the motor industry, the Hardy Spicer affair, could have had some effect with a lot of car workers living in this constituency.
Newcastle upon Tyne East, confirmation of the figures which we gave you briefly earlier.
2.1% swing, but enough to switch the seat to Labour.
Here is the Birmingham Aston result, which Labour has held. Julius Silverman holds the seat for Labour.
I think that represents hardly any swing compared to 59.
Here is Oxford, which is now in. There's no change there. Monty Woodhouse has held the seat.
6.7% swing. Liberal vote 17% up, 3% on last time.
Monty Woodhouse, Under Secretary of the Home Office.
Now, if we go over to Transport House, the Labour Party headquarters, we will find Peter Woon ready to talk, I think, to Ray Gunter there.
Well, the mood here about a couple of hours ago was far from certain, but now it's completely changed. There's an absolute conviction, with cheers ringing out every few minutes as the results come over the television, an absolute conviction that Labour are going to win. With me, the chairman of the organisation committee, Mr. Ray Gunter. I'd like to ask you first, Mr. Gunter, about the result at Smethwick.
I think that every decent Conservative in this country will be ashamed of the result at Smethwick. It is not a reflection, really, of the best of the Tory party.
Now, what's happening throughout the country, do you think?
I think it's going very well, and our organisation has done a magnificent job.
Let's have your forecast of the majority.
Oh, that is a bit early to do yet. I think we'll have a working majority, all right, but it's quite too soon to forecast how many.
Mr. Gunter, thank you very much.
All right.
Well, talking there to Mr. Gunter. Here's the New Forest result, and the Tories are back there, hardly unexpectedly. Sir Oliver Crossford-Ayre.
A very big Liberal vote there, 22%, almost getting second place from Labour, 4.4% swing to Labour compared to 59 in New Forest.
Here is confirmation of the figures of London Clapham.
There was a 3% swing in London Clapham in that Labour gain.
They're about to announce the result at Highton in Mr. Harold Wilson's constituency. Let's go up there now so we don't miss it.
Here at Highton, it does look as if very much earlier than anyone expected. Even I think that Mr. Harold Wilson expected that the result is just about coming. The familiar candidate is, of course, Mr. Wilson. In alphabetical order, the candidates are Michael Claude Baker, Communist, Harold Tucker, Conservative, and Labour candidate Mr. Wilson. The returning officer
I'm
is
about
Mr.
to
Wilcox,
declare the result
and it
of the
looks as though
parliamentary
he's
election in Highton. Before I do, I just want to make one announcement for the benefit of the press and for the spectators at the back of the hall. After this declaration has been made, I shall invite the candidates and their agents to accompany me to the front of the building, there to announce the result to the people of Highton who are assembled outside. Will you please keep your seats until the, if I may call it, the platform party have left the hall, and the police will then arrange for the doors to be opened, and you can, if you wish, come outside and see this second announcement. After the second announcement has been made, the candidates are invited to come back into the building.
Now, the last general election, Mr. Wilson's majority was 5,500 or so, and the main excitement here is really to see how much he has increased it.
Yes. This declaration is signed by me, Donald Wilgoose, Deputy Acting Returning Officer for the Parliamentary constituency of Highton. It is dated today, the 15th of October 1964. I, the undersigned, being the Deputy Acting Returning Officer for the constituency above mentioned, hereby give notice that the total number of votes given for each candidate at the election was as follows. For Michael Claude Watkins Baker, 899 votes. For Harold Tucker, 22,940 votes. For James Harold Wilson, 42,214 votes.
Majority, I could hear it, 20,000 for Mr. Wilson. Quite a startling majority. I hope Mr. Wilson will now go outside with the returning officer and the other candidates, and I'm hoping that afterwards we shall have the opportunity of talking to him about his own result and about his view of the situation at present.
You must let me finish,
uproar here
please.
is tremendous.
The next part is quite important, and I declare that the undermentioned person, namely James Harold Wilson, has been duly elected to serve as member for the said constituency of Highton.
The communist member lost his deposit. The member for Highton.
Mr. Deputy Acting Returning Officer, Mr. Chairman of the Council and Mrs. Connaughton, Mr. and Mrs. Tucker, and friends. First, it is my privilege this evening to propose on behalf of all of us a most sincere vote of thanks to the returning officer for the way in which he has discharged his unusually onerous problems in this count and everything that has gone before it. All of us who know him have always been impressed by the unfailing courtesy of Mr. Wilgoose, and all of us would wish to pay tribute to him for the strictly impartial way in which this count has been carried out, and, if I may say so, for the remarkable speed with which we have got the result in one of the largest constituencies in the country.
Mrs. Wilson is, of course, next to Mr. Wilson, and behind is Mr. Wilson's
In addition to that,
father.
It is no fault of Mr. Wilgoose that there is slightly more and wider interest in this Highton contest this year than there was in 1959. And Mr. Wilgoose has had to cope with some tremendous problems of accommodation for our friends from the press and television, our friends the photographers, and has done it, I think, to the satisfaction of everyone. With Mr. Wilgoose, I would like to couple all of his highly experienced officials and those who have given up their time tonight to sort out and to count the votes. But I don't think any vote of thanks would be complete without mentioning Chief Superintendent Cairns, Chief Inspector Swift, and the Highton Constabulary, who tonight, and their job isn't over yet, tonight have performed their task as ever with firmness, with tact, and with understanding for all of us. May I now express to Mr. and Mrs. Tucker my thanks, my feeling that they have conducted this campaign, as we have tried to do, in a gentlemanly and courteous way. I think this has been a model, so far as constituency battles are concerned, for all parts of the country, and I should like to give my personal thanks to Mr. Tucker and to those who worked with him in this campaign, so far as that is concerned. Now, I would like also, if I may, and I'm sorry to go on so long, among my own supporters, to single out one immediately, and that is Arthur Smith, one of the finest agents you could have.
Mr. Wilson is making the point that if this has been a presidential kind of campaign, he's very much the local member.
And to all my supporters, who are slightly more eloquent than usual this evening, but it's understandable, to the electors of the constituency for this smashing 19,000 majority, my very warm thanks. I will not at this time comment on the results that are coming in from other constituencies. I have heard some of them. I would describe them as moderately encouraging, and we must see how the rest of the night works out. So once again, Mr. Wilgoose, on behalf of all of us, our very warm thanks for all you have done.
Mr. Wilgoose and the three candidates are now, I think,
You got it now? You're too slow.
going to make their way out of the building. Right. There are scores of photographers here. They're going to make their way now, I think, out of the building where the result will be declared again. I hope we shall meet Mr. Wilson very shortly.
Mr. Wilgoose, Mr. Chairman.
Well, now, a quick comment, David, on this situation.
Well, I think I should say that on the figures now, it is quite plain that Labour is going to win this election. Whether it has a very comfortable margin or not is still open. The swing in the marginal Conservative-held seats has been greater than the national average, about 0.5% greater. The swing against ministers has been rather greater. The swing in the north has been greater, 9% on Merseyside, and only than in Birmingham, where it was only about 1%. In London, about 4%. But overall, Labour is, I think, plainly going to win the election with a majority not greater than 40 or less than 20 overall parties.
Right, let's now go to the state of the parties it needs looking at. Bob Mackenzie.
Well, here's the position as we now see the very real prospect of the third left-wing government to take office with a working majority. Labour lead over the Conservatives at 43, with a quarter of the results in, rather more. Here's the balance of parties. I told you in the upper right-hand corner that Labour had to get that up to 45 or 50 on the night. They're certainly going to do it. I see no possibility now that they'll fail to get their 45 or 50 in the upper right-hand corner. The three Labour losses, Smethwick, Birmingham Perry Bar and South Dorset, which they only got in a by-election anyway, and the one Liberal loss at Bolton West, Mr. Holt. But I see now no real possibility of anything else but that kind of win. Now, if we could look at the forecast board, remember the 3.5% swing needed to get the Conservatives out. The national swing to Labour is running around 4.2, and the likely majority somewhere 29, 30, that sort of area. Anything over 12, in my view, is a perfectly comfortable working majority, and the Labour Party is headed for that now.
Here's news that Edward Boyle is back in Birmingham Handsworth.
But with a very big swing against him, in contrast to the other Birmingham seats.
And we have Middlesbrough West, which has been held by Labour.
That's Dr. Jeremy Bray, who won the seat at the by-election 2 years ago. He's done very well indeed to hold it, because the Conservatives had a majority at the last election of something like 9,000.
10% swing to Labour compared to 59, though a swing back to the by-election.
Here are details, though I don't remember having given it to you, of the result in Halifax.
No, Maurice Millen is defeated there on quite a big swing in this marginal Yorkshire seat where a Liberal fought, not having fought in the previous election.
And of course,
here is the Tunbridge result for the Conservatives. No change in Tunbridge. Another Tory loss. Where is this?
It is in Nottingham Central. Colonel Cordeaux is defeated in Nottingham Central on quite a big swing in the first Nottingham result we've yet had. This means that Nottingham West must almost certainly go Labour too.
Nottingham were affected at the last election by the Hopkins affair.
There's no change in Nuneaton. Labour holds it. Leeds South for Labour. No change there.
Hugh Gaitskell's seat.
Only 0.6% swing. Possibly Gaitskell's disappearance from the seat made it less favourable territory for Labour.
Confirmation of Manchester Wythenshawe, the figures we did give you earlier, the Labour co-op gains.
About a 5% swing there.
We have Tottenham, which is now in, which is a Labour seat held by Labour with no change in London. We have a Labour gain in the north, and I can't identify it for the moment. Labour gain in the north. Who is this? No information of this Labour gain in the north, and none of us can recognise the picture on the caption, so you'll just have to wait until we can tell you who it is. Let's try instead the Reigate result in the depths of Surrey, which not surprisingly the Conservatives have held in the shape of. We have news that
Maurice
Edelman is in with a majority of 3530.
That's a Coventry North, is his constituency. The
Coventry North. Very low swing to Labour in this first Coventry result.
Here's the Nottingham Central confirmation, a Labour gain. I don't remember giving that before.
Yes, we had on the Rush result, and that was about a 4% swing in Nottingham.
Here is the Lee result. That's Lee, Lancashire, is it not? That's a Labour seat which has stayed Labour. No comments on Lee? No comments on Lee. Right.
There was a 6% swing against Sir Edward Boyle in Birmingham Handsworth. Now again, depopulation may affect it, but it's very different and very sharp contrast to next door Smethwick, where there was a 7% swing to the Conservatives.
Here's the result from Dagenham, London, a strong Labour seat, which Labour has held with the majority that you see.
We're going to hear in a moment of a Labour gain in the Hartley pools.
Oh, that would be, of course.
That was the game we just saw.
That was the game we just saw. That was the
Let's
picture.
first take Woking, please. Don't let's get muddled. Woking, which the Conservatives have held without a change. Acton under Lyme is now in with a Labour. That's no change. Leicester North West, Barnet Janner for Labour. No change there. Newcastle on Tyne Central. Once again, a Labour seat, which Labour have held without a change.
6% swing there.
Dead short deputy.
Birmingham Selly Oak, Conservative seat held by the Conservatives. We now take Southall, nearer London. That's no change, a Labour seat held by Labour.
It was one where the coloured vote issue might have cost Labour votes, and I think has in fact slightly cut the Labour majority. The coloured issue does seem to be coming up in these election results.
We now have confirmation of Glasgow Kelvingrove as a Labour seat held by Labour.
And a Labour
seat gained.
There's a 6.3% swing in this first Scottish result. I think this is very important. This is the first result we've had from Scotland, and it does indicate that there is a swing going on fairly strongly there.
We have the Tories in Rugby.
This is Mr. Wise. This is a seat which they might well have lost, but he's been a very independent MP. He led the attack on the RPM bill.
And this is a remarkable win because it's one of the seats that Labour certainly should have won on the national swing, but on the Midlands swing it doesn't go. Midlands are very different from the rest of the country.
Here's the result in from London Peckham. Mrs. Corbett for Labour. There's no change there.
Very safe Labour seat.
Frida Corbett. Erith and Crayford, that's Mr. Dodds, well-known Labour Member of Parliament, Labour Co-op member, no change there. Let's go to Liverpool, where I see Mr. Marples is waiting to talk to us.
Mr. Marples, why do you think Merseyside has gone strongly in favour of the Labour Party?
Well, I don't think it's gone very strongly in favour of the Labour Party, but the 4 seats that have been lost in Merseyside were always very marginal. And I mean, if people voted Conservative, then we had the 4 seats, and if they swing a little to Labour, then Labour has the 4 seats. They have always had quite a number of marginal seats in Liverpool, and those 4, like Walton, Kirkdale, Toxteth and so on that have gone, they really are marginal seats in the true sense of the word.
Are you yourself convinced now there's going to be a Labour government?
No, I don't know, because different parts of the country have varied. For example, I've been to North Wales and I've spoken in Birmingham, I've spoken in different places, and the extraordinary thing about this election is that the trend in certain parts of the country has been different than in other parts of the country.
What about your own result, Mr. Marples? Are you happy with that? Your majority was down.
Well, I've always said as a Minister of Transport, and I'm still the Minister of Transport, I'm never happy because I'm never satisfied that one's reached perfection. My majority is down largely because of the intervention of a Liberal. Wallace has always had a very strong Liberal tradition, and in point of fact, a number of years ago, the Liberals practically beat Lord Brabazon, who's now dead, and there was then More Brabazon. They practically beat him. And we've a strong Liberal tradition there, and the Liberal came in this time, worked very hard, got a number of votes, but I regret to say, pinched most of them from me, and hardly any of them from Labour.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Marples.
Right, time we went, I think, to Bob Mackenzie.
Well, despite Mr. Marple's reluctance to concede the situation, it is looking very, very much like a Labour win. Here are the 26 seats the Labour Party has gained, roughly half the number needed to unseat the government, and nothing like half the results are in as yet. You notice marked with white the ones which the Tories simply could not afford to lose. And there are enough of them showing up in this list to make it look very much as if we're going to have that change. The Conservatives have gained only 3 seats against this 26 gained by Labour. The 3 they've gained include Smethwick, the one with a great centre of controversy, Dorset South, which after all was a by-election case, and Birmingham Perry Bar. But on this position now, it looks increasingly at every moment as if Labour is surer than ever, with a narrow but comfortable majority.
Now, here we have news that Labour has gained Haywood and Royton with Mr. Barnett, and there's the majority figure.
That's Mr. John Levy, who won the seat for the Conservatives in 1959 for the first time in over 60 years.
3% swing there, less than in most Lancashire seats.
The Labour have gained in Wales, Swansea West.
That's Mr. Hugh Rees, who won the seat for them last time.
3% swing in almost the first Welsh result we've had.
Yes. This is the seat the Conservatives haven't had for 60
There's
years.
a Labour gain in Woolwich in London just in.
Colin Turner defeated on a fairly big swing in this East London seat.
Here's Leicester North East, which has been held for Labour by Mr. Bradley. No unexpected thing there. Hello.
Here's an
some
astonishing
news.
result
I see that
from Hampstead. Mr. Henry Brooke, the Home Secretary's majority cut down to below 2,000 from 12,000.
But the Conservatives hold the seat. Here's West Bromwich in now for Labour. Mr. Foley, there's no change there.
There was a 10% swing in Hampstead against the Conservatives. It really is remarkable.
That's Geoffrey Rippon, who's been beaten in Norwich South. This is the seat that was always likely to go. He's the Minister of Public Building and Works. It was marginal.
But it was the sort of seat that really was the pointer to the election, and the swing there represents something like a 4.5% swing compared to 59.
This is the second senior minister to go tonight, I think, so far.
A Tory has won again in Winchester. The Conservatives, Rear Admiral Morgan Giles is back.
Who got in a by-election earlier this year. A 6.2% swing compared to the general election, a slight swing back compared to the by-election.
Here's the Southampton test result for Charles Fletcher Cook. There's no change there. A very close thing.
But that's a very big swing, 6% or so there. And Peter Tapsell has just been defeated in Nottingham West. Peter Tapsell has been defeated on a fairly big swing in Nottingham West.
This was bound to go. He only won it by 164 seats at the last election.
Here's Surrey East, which the Conservatives have held.
And a most remarkable Liberal vote. The Liberals get nearly twice as many votes as the Labour Party in Surrey East. They did get second place there last time, but this is a very big pull-up for them in nearly Orpington country.
Labour has Glasgow Central, Mr. McGuinness.
A fairly big swing to Labour in Glasgow Central.
Weston-super-Mare is in for the Conservatives, Mr. Webster.
2.8% swing in almost the first Conservative-held southwest seat we've heard from after Exeter.
He's a parachute jumper, Mr. Webster. London, Deptford. Now, that's Mr. Silkin. Oh, there's a well-known name. The Labour Party, no change in Deptford, London. Labour has it. Let's go back now up north again. Stretford, which the Conservatives have in the shape of Mr. Storey. They've held the seat.
A 6.6% swing in Stretford.
There's confirmation of the rugby result. Here are the full figures of rugby.
A very slight swing to the Conservatives there, 1.3% to the Conservatives in this marginal Midland seat.
London, Kensington North, in the shape of Mr. Rogers, there's no change. Labour have held the seat.
2.8% swing to Labour in Kensington North.
We now have London Vauxhall, just across the other side of the river.
George Strauss, one of the few members of the Labour Party with senior government experience.
2.1 swing.
Here's Kilmarnock from Scotland, Labour seat held by Labour. No
Rather
change.
big swing there in the third Scottish seat we've heard from.
Willie Ross will be the Secretary of State for Scotland, probably, in a Wilson cabinet.
Wandsworth Central in London, Labour has. It's a Labour gain in Wandsworth Central.
It's a much bigger swing than in adjoining Clapham. It joins South Battersea as this group of marginals which seem to be all going over to Labour. Putney is the one to watch now in that area.
Here's Torquay. It's not perhaps surprising Mr. Bennett, well-known MP for Torquay, has held the seat.
2.3% swing to Labour. The Liberals actually came second. It's worth pointing that out. It's very good news for the Liberals in terms of these marginal seats in the southwest.
Now, looking down in front of me, I see Alan Wicker entirely surrounded by people in Trafalgar Square. So let's go down there and join him in the open.
Alan Wicker in Trafalgar Square. A considerably noisier Trafalgar Square at the moment, where the BBC election screen has been an enormous attraction. A great crowd here cheering fairly impartially all victories, the victories of all three parties. there have been a number of thunder flashes let off, but otherwise the crowd has been amiable up to now, and the early swimmers have been removed from the fountains. Alan Wicker, Trafalgar Square.